Imagine pulling a single penny from your pocket, a coin so ordinary that most people wouldn't even give it a second glance. But what if that small copper coin carried a hidden detail that could turn it into something far more valuable, even hundreds or thousands of dollars? Today, we're uncovering the story behind the 1960 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that looks simple on the surface but holds surprising secrets beneath. The 1960 D Lincoln penny is part of one of the most iconic coin series in American history. First introduced in 1909, the Lincoln cent was created to honor President Abraham Lincoln, becoming the first U.S. coin to feature a real person. By 1960, this design had already been in circulation for over 50 years, making it a familiar piece of everyday life for millions of Americans. The D Mint mark on this coin tells us it was produced at the Denver Mint. In 1960, the United States was experiencing a time of growth and change. The economy was expanding, and coins like the Lincoln penny were being produced in massive numbers to support everyday transactions. In fact, the Denver Mint struck over 1 billion pennies that year, which might make you think this coin is extremely common. And in many cases, it is. But here's where the story gets interesting. Not all 1960 D pennies are the same at first glance. Every coin may look identical. The front, or obverse, shows Abraham Lincoln's profile, along with the words, "In God We Trust, Liberty," and the year 1960. On the back, or reverse, you'll find the familiar wheat ears design that had been used since 1909, symbolizing prosperity and unity. But in 1960, something unusual happened during the minting process. The U.S. Mint introduced a subtle but important change to the way the date was designed on the coin. This led to two distinct varieties, the large date and the small date. The difference between these two may seem minor, but for collectors, it's everything. On the large date version, the numbers in 1960 appear taller and more evenly spaced. The 6 and 9 look more open, and the overall date is easier to read at a glance. On the small date version, the numbers are slightly more compact. The 6 and 9 appear tighter, and the 0 is more perfectly round. Now, here's where the value starts to shift. While both versions were minted in large numbers, the small date variety is much harder to find in high-quality condition. And when you add the D Mint mark into the mix, things get even more interesting. The 1960 D small date penny is considered one of the more desirable coins from that year, especially if it has been well preserved. But that's not the only detail that collectors look for. The 1960 D penny is made primarily of copper, with a composition of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. This gives it that classic reddish color, especially when the coin is in uncirculated condition. Over time, many of these coins have darkened or developed a brown tone due to oxidation. However, coins that still retain their original red color are often worth significantly more. Condition plays a huge role in value. A worn 1960 D penny might only be worth a few cents above face value. But a bright, uncirculated example with sharp details and minimal marks can be worth much more, especially if it's graded by a professional service. And then there are errors. Minting errors are one of the biggest reasons a seemingly common coin can become highly valuable. With the 1960 D penny, collectors have discovered several types of errors that can increase the coin's worth dramatically. These include double dies, where parts of the design appear duplicated, as well as repunched mint marks, where the D was stamped more than once, creating a slightly overlapping effect. One of the most sought-after features is strong doubling in the date or lettering. While not extremely common, these error coins can command impressive prices when found in good condition. So, how much is a 1960 D penny actually worth? For most circulated coins, the value is modest, often ranging from a few cents to $1. But when you move into higher grades, especially uncirculated coins with a strong red color, the value can climb quickly. Some examples have sold for tens or even hundreds of dollars, depending on their condition and rarity. In rare cases, exceptional specimens with unique errors or near-perfect preservation have reached even higher values at auction. These are the coins that collectors dream of finding, often hidden in old jars, coin rolls, or inherited collections. Now, you might be wondering how to tell if your 1960 D penny is real and whether it has any of these valuable traits. The first step is to examine the mint mark. The D should be located just below the date on the front of the coin. It should appear clean and well-defined, not blurry or misshapen. If the mint mark looks unusual or out of place, it could indicate an error or, in some cases, a counterfeit. Next, take a close look at the date. Try to determine whether you have a large date or small date variety. This can be done by comparing the shape and spacing of the numbers. Many collectors use magnification to get a clearer view. You should also inspect the coin's surface. Look for signs of wear, scratches, or discoloration. Coins with fewer imperfections are generally more valuable. If the coin still has a bright, reddish tone, that's a good sign it may be in higher condition. Weight and size can also help confirm authenticity. A genuine 1960D penny should weigh about 3.11 grams and have a diameter of 19 millimeters. Significant deviations from these measurements could indicate a fake or altered coin. Another tip is to avoid cleaning the coin. While it might seem like a good idea to make it look shiny, cleaning can actually reduce its value. Collectors prefer coins in their natural state, even if they show some signs of age. There are also some fun and surprising facts about the 1960D penny that make it even more interesting. For example, this was one of the last years before major changes in U.S. coin composition began to take place. Just a few years later, in 1965, the U.S. Mint would remove silver from many coins due to rising metal costs. While pennies remained mostly copper until 1982, the 1960 penny represents a time when American coins still had a higher intrinsic metal value. Another interesting detail is how many of these coins are still in circulation today. Even though billions were made, it's becoming harder to find high-quality examples in everyday use. Many have been lost, damaged, or simply worn down over decades of handling. Collectors also enjoy the challenge of finding both the large date and small date versions, especially with the Denver Mint mark. It adds an extra layer of excitement to what might otherwise seem like a very common coin. So why do collectors still care about the 1960D Lincoln penny today? Part of the appeal comes from its history. It's a connection to a specific moment in time, a piece of everyday life from the early 1960s. For many people, it's a reminder of a different era, when even a single penny had a bit more buying power than it does now. But beyond that, it's the hidden potential that keeps collectors interested. The idea that a simple coin could hold unexpected value is incredibly exciting. It turns something ordinary into a treasure hunt, where every detail matters. Whether it's the small date variety, a rare minting error, or a perfectly preserved example, the 1960D penny offers multiple ways for collectors to discover something special. And that's what makes it so enduring as you go through your spare change or look through old coin collections. Keep an eye out for that small D mint mark and the subtle differences in the date. You never know what you might find. Because sometimes, the most valuable discoveries aren't the ones that shine the brightest, but the ones that quietly wait to be noticed. And the next time you see a simple penny, take a closer look. It might just be more than pocket change. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a simple penny, and discovering it might be worth far more than 1 cent. Not because it's gold, not because it's ancient, but because of a small letter stamped beneath a date. Today, we're uncovering the story of the 1962D Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that looks ordinary but holds secrets that collectors quietly search for. The 1962D Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced in the United States, part of the long-running Lincoln cent series first introduced in 1909. The small D mint mark on the coin tells us it was struck at the Denver Mint. At first glance, it may look like any other penny you've seen thousands of times. But for collectors, that tiny detail is where the story begins. To understand this coin, we have to step back into the early 1960s. America was going through a period of growth and change. Everyday commerce relied heavily on coins like the penny, and the U.S. Mint was producing them in massive numbers to meet demand. In 1962, the Denver Mint struck over 1 billion Lincoln cents. That sounds like a huge number, and it is. But within those billions, small differences, errors, and conditions created coins that stand out today. The design of the 1962D penny carries deep historical meaning. On the front, you'll find the familiar profile of President Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner. This design was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. It was the first time a real person appeared on a circulating U.S. coin, which was a bold and controversial move at the time. On the back of the 1962 penny, you'll see 2 wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent and United States of America. This is known as the wheat reverse design, used from 1909 until 1958. But here's where it gets interesting. By 1962, the wheat design had already been replaced by the Lincoln Memorial design in 1959. So technically, the 1962 penny you're looking at should have the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, not the wheat stalks. This means if you ever come across a 1962 penny with wheat ears on the back, you might be holding something extremely unusual, possibly even a rare mint error. The standard 1962D penny is made of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. It has a smooth edge and weighs about 3.11 grams. The color can range from bright red to a darker brown, depending on how much it has been exposed to air and handling over time. Collectors often classify these coins as red, red-brown, or brown, and that color difference can affect value significantly. Now let's talk about what makes the 1962D penny truly interesting. On the surface, it's not considered a rare coin in circulated condition. You can still find them in old collections, coin jars, or inherited boxes. But the real value comes from condition and from rare errors. Coins that were never used in circulation, known as uncirculated coins, can be worth much more. A 1962D penny in average circulated condition might only be worth a few cents. But in mint condition, especially with a bright red surface and no visible wear, it can sell for several dollars, sometimes even more depending on grading. The real excitement begins when we look at errors. Mint errors are mistakes that happen during the coin production process, and they can turn an ordinary penny into a collector's prize. Some 1962D pennies have been found with double dies, where parts of the design appear slightly duplicated. Others may show off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or die cracks. These imperfections make each coin unique, and collectors are always searching for them. There have been auction sales where high-grade 1962D pennies reached impressive prices. For example, a coin graded at the top of the scale, known as MS67 Red, has sold for hundreds of dollars. That's a huge jump from 1 cent. The reason is simple. Very few coins survive in such perfect condition after decades. Collectors use professional grading services to evaluate coins. These services look at tiny details like scratches, luster, and strike quality. A difference of just 1 grade point can mean a big difference in value. That's why two 1962D pennies that look similar to the average person can have completely different prices in the market. So how can you tell if you have a valuable 1962D penny? Start by looking for the mint mark. The small d should be located just below the date on the front of the coin. Make sure it looks natural and not altered. Some people try to add fake mint marks to coins to increase their value, so authenticity matters. Next, examine the condition. Look for sharp details in Lincoln's hair and face. Check the surface for scratches or discoloration. A coin with a bright, original red color and minimal marks is more desirable. If you have a magnifying glass, use it to inspect for doubling or unusual features that might indicate an error. Weight and size are also important. A genuine 1962D penny should weigh about 3.11 grams and have a consistent copper appearance. If something feels off, it's worth having the coin checked by an expert. There are also some fun and surprising details about this coin. Did you know that pennies from this era contain far more copper than modern pennies? Today's pennies are mostly zinc with a thin copper coating, but older coins like the 1962D have real copper value. In fact, the metal content alone can be worth more than 1 cent, although melting coins for metal is restricted by law. Another interesting fact is that millions of these pennies were saved by collectors right from the start. During the early 1960s, coin collecting became a popular hobby in the United States. People began setting aside rolls of new pennies, hoping they would become valuable in the future. This is one reason why uncirculated examples of the 1962D penny still exist today. Collectors love this coin not because it is the rarest, but because it represents a moment in American history. It's a piece of everyday life from a different time, when cash transactions ruled and every penny mattered. It's also a great entry point for new collectors, since it's affordable and easy to find, yet still offers the thrill of discovery. There's something exciting about searching through old coins, knowing that one small detail could change everything. A slight doubling, a perfect condition, or an unusual strike could turn a simple penny into something worth far more than expected. And that's the real magic of the 1962 Lincoln penny. It reminds us that value isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to look closer, so the next time you come across a handful of old pennies, take a moment before you spend them. Look at the dates. Check for that small D mint mark, because among those coins, there might be one with a story, a history, and a value far beyond its face. And who knows, the next penny you pick up might not just be change. It might be a discovery. What if the next penny you find in your pocket isn't just loose change, but a quiet survivor of American history that collectors are still hunting today? A coin so common at first glance, yet filled with small details that could make all the difference. Today, we're talking about the 1975 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that millions of people have seen. But very few have truly looked at closely. At first glance, the 1975 Lincoln penny doesn't seem special. It's part of the long-running Lincoln Cent series, featuring Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. If you've ever handled U.S. coins, you've probably seen one without even realizing it. But like many coins in American history, its true story lies in the details most people ignore. The year 1975 was a time of economic uncertainty in the United States. Inflation was rising, and everyday items were becoming more expensive. The U.S. Mint was producing billions of pennies to keep up with demand. These coins were struck primarily in Philadelphia and Denver, with San Francisco producing proof versions for collectors. Now here's where things get interesting. If your 1975 penny has no mint mark under the date, that means it was struck in Philadelphia. At that time, the Philadelphia Mint did not place a mint mark on pennies. So technically, no mint mark doesn't mean missing. It actually means it came from the main mint facility in the country. But just because millions were made doesn't mean all of them are equal. The 1975 Lincoln penny is made mostly of copper, about 95% copper and 5% zinc. It has a warm, reddish-brown tone when preserved well, though many have darkened over time. The front shows Abraham Lincoln's profile, a design introduced in 1909, making it one of the longest-running designs in U.S. coin history. The back features the Lincoln Memorial with tiny details so precise that, if you look closely, you can even see a miniature statue of Lincoln inside. This coin weighs about 3.11 grams and has a smooth edge. These basic details may sound ordinary, but collectors know that even the smallest variation can make a big difference. One of the most important factors in the value of a 1975 no-mint mark penny is its condition. Most of these coins were heavily circulated. They passed through countless hands, cash registers, and pockets. As a result, finding one in pristine condition today is not easy. Collectors use grading terms to describe condition. A heavily worn coin might be worth just a few cents, but a coin that looks almost brand new, with sharp details and original shine, can be worth significantly more. In fact, some high-grade examples of the 1975 no-mint mark penny have sold for impressive amounts. Coins graded at the very top levels with strong luster and minimal marks have reached values in the hundreds of dollars. And in rare cases, exceptionally preserved coins have sold for even more at auction. But condition isn't the only thing that matters. Errors and varieties are where things get really exciting. During the minting process, mistakes can happen. These mistakes are what collectors love, because they turn an ordinary coin into something unique. For the 1975 penny, collectors often look for double die errors. This happens when the design is stamped onto the coin more than once, slightly misaligned. The result is a doubling effect, especially visible in the lettering or the date. To the untrained eye, it may look like a blur, but to a collector, it's a sign of rarity. Another type of error is off-center strikes. This occurs when the coin blank is not properly aligned during minting, causing part of the design to be missing. The more dramatic the misalignment, the more valuable the coin can be. There are also coins with unusual toning or color variations. While not always errors, these can make a coin stand out. Some collectors are willing to pay a premium for coins with unique visual appeal. Now, you might be wondering, if so many were made, why would anyone pay serious money for one? The answer is simple. Survival in top condition is rare. Think about it. In 1975, pennies were used every day. People didn't save them, protect them, or treat them as collectibles. Most were spent without a second thought. Over time, they became scratched, worn, and faded. So while billions were minted, only a tiny fraction remain in near-perfect condition today. That's what creates demand. There are real examples of collectors paying strong prices for these coins. A well-preserved 1975 no-mint mark penny, graded at a high level, has sold for over $1,000 in some cases. These are not your average pocket coins. They are carefully selected, professionally graded pieces that represent the best of what survived. Of course, not every 1975 penny is worth that much. Most are still worth just a few cents. But the possibility that one could be valuable is what keeps collectors searching. So how can you tell if you have a valuable one? Start with the basics. Look at the date. Make sure it clearly reads 1975. Then check under the date. If there is no mint mark, it was made in Philadelphia. Next, examine the condition. Does the coin still have a bright, coppery shine? Are the details on Lincoln's face sharp? Can you clearly see the lines of the Lincoln Memorial on the back? The better the condition, the higher the potential value. Then, look for errors. Use a magnifying glass if you can. Check the lettering in Liberty and In God We Trust. Look at the date. Do you see any doubling or unusual shapes? Even a small detail could make a big difference. Weight is another clue. A genuine 1975 penny should weigh around 3.11 grams. If it's significantly different, it could be damaged, altered, or possibly something unusual. Also be aware of fakes. While it's not common to counterfeit low-value coins, some altered coins do exist. For example, someone might try to modify a date or create the appearance of an error. If you think you have something special, it's always a good idea to have it checked by a professional grading service. Here's a fun detail that many people don't realize. The Lincoln Memorial design on the back of these pennies was used from 1959 to 2008. That means your 1975 penny is part of a nearly 50-year design run. It connects generations of Americans through something as simple as a coin. Another interesting fact is that copper pennies like the 1975 version are no longer made the same way today. Starting in 1982, the U.S. Mint switched to a mostly zinc composition with a thin copper coating. That means older copper pennies have a different feel, weight, and even sound compared to modern ones. Some collectors actually set aside pre-1982 pennies just for their copper content. While the metal value itself isn't usually the main reason for collecting, it adds another layer of interest. So why do collectors still love the 1975 no-mint mark penny? It's because it represents something bigger than itself. It's a reminder that value isn't always obvious. A coin that looks ordinary can hold hidden potential. It teaches patience, attention to detail, and the excitement of discovery. For many collectors, the thrill isn't just about money. It's about the hunt. It's about going through old jars of coins, checking dates, and hoping to find something special. And sometimes that effort pays off. Even if you never find a high-value example, the process itself is rewarding. You start to see coins differently. You notice details you never noticed before. You begin to understand the history behind everyday objects. And that's what makes this coin so fascinating. It's not rare in the traditional sense. It's not made of gold or silver. It doesn't have a dramatic story of being lost and found. But it quietly carries decades of history in a form that almost anyone can access. So the next time you come across a penny, don't ignore it. Take a closer look at the date. Check for a mint mark. Notice the condition, because hidden among ordinary coins could be a piece that stands out, not because it looks different at first glance, but because of the story it tells. And who knows, that simple 1975 no-mint mark Lincoln penny in your hand might be more than just 1 cent. It might be your first step into a world where small details lead to big discoveries. What if the penny sitting quietly in your pocket right now, the one you almost ignored, could be worth far more than just 1 cent? Not because it looks flashy, not because it's made of gold, but because of something subtle, something most people never even notice. Today, we're uncovering the truth about the 1978 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that millions of people have seen. But very few truly understand. At first glance, the 1978 Lincoln penny looks completely ordinary. It carries the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front, a design that has been part of American coinage since 1909. On the back, you'll see the classic wheat-era successor design featuring the Lincoln Memorial. It's a coin that blends into everyday life so easily that most people would never stop to examine it closely. But here's where things get interesting. When you hear the phrase "no mint mark," it might sound like something is missing, like a mistake or an error. And that's exactly what sparks curiosity. People start to wonder if that missing mark could mean hidden value. To understand this coin, we need to go back to the year 1978. The United States was in a period of economic transition. Inflation had affected the value of money, and the cost of producing coins was rising. Pennies, despite being worth only 1 cent, were still being produced in massive numbers for everyday use. Billions of them were struck that year. The majority of 1978 pennies were minted in Philadelphia and Denver. Coins from Denver carry a small D mint mark, usually located just below the date. But coins made in Philadelphia during that time did not carry any mint mark at all. That's right, no mint mark wasn't an error. It was actually the standard. So when you see a 1978 penny with no mint mark, you are looking at a coin that was produced in Philadelphia, one of the oldest and most historic mints in the United States. Now you might be thinking, if billions of these coins were made, how could any of them be valuable? That's where condition, rarity within the condition, and small details begin to matter. Let's talk about the coin itself. The 1978 Lincoln penny is made primarily of copper. In fact, it contains about 95% copper and a small amount of zinc. This gives it that rich, warm, reddish-brown color when it's in good condition. Over time, as the coin circulates, it darkens and develops a deeper tone. On the front, you'll see Abraham Lincoln facing right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1978 to the right. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stands tall, and if you look closely enough, you can even see a tiny depiction of Lincoln's statue inside the building. Now here's something most people never notice. Even among coins that look identical, there can be subtle differences. Some coins were struck more sharply than others. Some have cleaner surfaces. Some were never circulated at all, meaning they were preserved in nearly perfect condition from the moment they were made. And that's where value starts to increase. A typical 1978 no mint mark penny that has been used in everyday transactions is usually worth just 1 cent, maybe a few cents at best. But if you find one in uncirculated condition, meaning it has no wear and still shows its original shine, the value can rise significantly. Collectors use grading systems to evaluate coins. A coin graded at the highest levels, such as mint state 65 or higher, can be worth several dollars. And if you're lucky enough to find one in near-perfect condition, with strong luster and no visible marks, it could reach even higher values. In some cases, high-grade 1978 no mint mark pennies have sold for over $50 to $100 at auctions. And while that might not sound like life-changing money, it's a huge jump from just 1 cent. But that's not all. There are also error coins. Error coins are where things get really exciting. These are coins that were struck with some kind of mistake during the minting process. Could be a double strike, where the design appears slightly duplicated. Could be an off-center strike, where the image is not properly aligned. Or it could be a die error, where the tools used to stamp the coin had flaws. A 1978 penny with a noticeable error can be worth much more than a standard coin. Some error examples have sold for hundreds of dollars, depending on how dramatic and rare the mistake is. Now let's talk about how you can identify a genuine 1978 no mint mark penny. First, check the date. It should clearly read 1978, with no signs of alteration. Next, look below the date. If there is no letter, that means it was minted in Philadelphia. That's normal for this year. Then examine the coin's surface. Look for details in Lincoln's hair, the clarity of the lettering, and the condition of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. A sharp, clean design usually indicates a higher quality strike. Weight is another clue. A genuine 1978 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If the weight is significantly off, it could be a sign of damage or a counterfeit. Also, be cautious of coins that look too perfect in a suspicious way. Some altered coins are cleaned or polished to appear more valuable, but this can actually reduce their worth in the eyes of collectors. Here's a surprising fact. Many valuable coins are discovered not in collections, but in everyday places. People have found rare pennies in old jars, forgotten drawers, and even in pocket change. That means the next valuable coin could be closer than you think. Another interesting detail is how long these coins have survived. A penny from 1978 has been around for decades. It has passed through countless hands, traveled across cities, and witnessed changes in the economy. Each coin carries a silent history. Collectors are drawn to this sense of connection. Holding a coin like this feels like holding a small piece of time. So why do collectors still care about a common coin like the 1978 no-mint mark penny? The answer is simple. It's not just about rarity. It's about the challenge of finding the best example. It's about discovering something overlooked. It's about turning an ordinary object into something meaningful. For some collectors, it's the thrill of the hunt. For others, it's the satisfaction of building a complete set of Lincoln pennies. And for many, it's the hope that one day, a simple coin might reveal unexpected value. There's also something deeply fascinating about the idea that value isn't always obvious. A coin that looks ordinary can hold hidden potential, depending on its condition, its details, and sometimes even a small mistake made decades ago. As you go about your day, think about the coins you come across. That handful of change in your pocket or sitting on your table might include pieces of history that most people ignore. The 1978 Lincoln penny with no mint mark may not always be rare in the traditional sense, but under the right conditions, it can become something far more interesting. It reminds us that even the most common objects can carry stories, value, and mystery. And the next time you see a penny, don't just spend it without a second thought. Take a closer look, because sometimes the smallest details are the ones that matter the most. What if the small copper-colored penny sitting unnoticed in your pocket right now could actually be worth far more than 1 cent? Not hundreds, not thousands in most cases, but in the right condition or with the right detail, even a simple 1979 D Lincoln penny can surprise you in ways most people never expect. The 1979 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny is one of those coins that millions of Americans have seen, handled, and spent without a second thought. At first glance, it looks completely ordinary. It carries the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back, a design that had already been in circulation for 2 decades by that time. But like many coins in U.S. history, its true story goes deeper than its appearance. To understand this coin, we need to step back into the late 1970s. The United States was going through a period of economic change. Inflation had been rising, and the cost of producing coins was becoming a serious concern. The Lincoln penny, first introduced in 1909, had already undergone a major transformation in 1959 when the reverse design was changed to the Lincoln Memorial. By 1979, the coin was still being made primarily of copper, but the pressure to reduce costs was quietly building behind the scenes. The 1979 D penny was struck at the Denver Mint, which is indicated by the small D mint mark just below the date on the front of the coin. That simple letter tells you where the coin was made, and for collectors, it can make all the difference. In 1979, the Denver Mint produced over 4 billion pennies, which means this coin is not rare in terms of quantity. In fact, it is extremely common in circulation. So why are people still interested in it? The answer lies in condition, detail, and the possibility of errors. Even a very common coin can become valuable if it meets certain criteria. Let's talk about the design first. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln facing right, a design created by Victor David Brenner. Above his head is the word Liberty, and to the right, the year 1979. Below the date is the small D mint mark. The phrase "In God We Trust" arches across the top. On the back, you see the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 by Frank Gasparo. If you look closely, you can actually see a tiny representation of Lincoln sitting inside the memorial. Above it reads United States of America, and below it, 1 cent. The phrase "E pluribus unum" sits just above the memorial. The coin is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, giving it that classic reddish-brown color when new. Over time, many of these coins darken or develop a brown tone due to oxidation. Now here's where things get interesting. Even though billions were made, not all 1979 D pennies are equal. The vast majority you find in circulation today are heavily worn and worth only face value. But coins that have been preserved in near-perfect condition, especially those with a bright red luster, can be worth significantly more. Collectors use specific terms to describe condition. You might hear MS65 or MS67, which refer to mint state grades. These are coins that show little to no wear and still retain their original shine. A 1979 D penny in average condition might be worth 1 cent, but in high mint state grades it can sell for several dollars, sometimes even more depending on quality. But condition is only part of the story. Error coins are where the real excitement begins. During the minting process, mistakes can happen. These mistakes are not supposed to exist, which is exactly why collectors love them. Some 1979 D pennies have been found with what are called double dies. This happens when the coin's design is accidentally stamped more than once, slightly offset, creating a doubling effect on letters or numbers. You might notice it in the date, the word liberty, or in God we trust. There are also off-center strikes, where the coin was not properly aligned during minting, leaving part of the design missing. Another type is a clipped planchet, where a piece of the coin is literally missing because the metal blank was cut incorrectly. These error coins are rare compared to the billions of normal coins, and they can sell for much higher prices. Depending on the severity and visibility of the error, a 1979 D penny with a noticeable mint mistake can sell anywhere from $20 to several $100s. There have even been auction examples where high-grade error coins attracted serious attention from collectors. While most standard 1979 D pennies won't make headlines, exceptional examples with both high condition and clear errors can stand out in the market. So how do you know if you have something valuable? First, check the date and mint mark. Make sure it reads 1979 with a small d under the date. Next, examine the condition. Is the coin shiny with a bright red color, or is it dark and worn? Coins that still have their original red color are generally more desirable. Then, look closely for unusual features. Use a magnifying glass if you have one. Check the letters and numbers for any signs of doubling. Look at the edges of the coin for irregular shapes or missing sections. Pay attention to anything that seems off compared to a normal penny. Also, be aware of cleaned coins. Some people try to polish or clean old coins to make them look better, but this actually reduces their value. Collectors prefer coins in their natural state, even if they show some aging.as for fakes. It's very rare for someone to counterfeit a 1979 D penny because the coin itself is not extremely valuable in most cases. However, altered coins do exist. For example, someone might try to modify the date or add a fake mint mark to make it appear more valuable. That's why it's important to compare your coin with verified examples or consult a professional if you believe you have something special. Here's a fun fact that many people don't realize. In 1979, the US Mint was already experimenting with different metal compositions for pennies. Just a few years later, in 1982, the composition would officially change to mostly zinc with a thin copper coating. That makes the 1979 penny part of the final era of traditional copper coins, which adds a bit of historical significance. Another interesting detail is how widely these coins traveled. Because so many were produced, 1979 D pennies circulated across the entire country and even beyond. It's entirely possible that a coin minted in Denver ended up in New York, California, or even overseas. Collectors today often enjoy searching through rolls of pennies, hoping to find high-grade examples or rare errors. This process, known as coin roll hunting, has become a popular hobby. The 1979 D penny is one of the coins that often shows up in these searches, making it both accessible and exciting. What makes this coin truly fascinating is the contrast between its ordinary appearance and its hidden potential. It's a reminder that value is not always obvious. Sometimes, the smallest and most overlooked objects can hold unexpected stories and opportunities. For many collectors, the 1979 D penny represents more than just money. It's a connection to a specific moment in American history, a piece of everyday life from decades ago. It's also a starting point for new collectors who are just beginning to explore the world of coins. And that's really the beauty of it. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars to get involved in coin collecting. Sometimes, all it takes is a closer look at the change you already have. A coin like the 1979 D Lincoln penny proves that even the most common items can become meaningful when you understand their story. So the next time you come across a penny, don't ignore it. Take a moment to look at the date, the mint mark, and the details. Because hidden among billions of ordinary coins, there's always a chance that one of them could be just a little more special than it seems. And who knows? The next valuable coin might already be in your hands, waiting to be discovered. What if the penny sitting quietly in your pocket right now, the one you almost ignored, could actually be worth far more than 1 cent? Not because it's made of gold, but because of something almost invisible, something most people never even notice. Today, we're taking a closer look at the 1984 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that millions of Americans have handled, spent, and forgotten. Yet a small number of these pennies carry hidden details that have turned ordinary pocket change into collector interest at first glance. The 1984 penny doesn't look special. It features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front, a design that has been part of American currency since 1909. On the back, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial, a design used from 1959 until 2008. It feels ordinary, and in most cases it is. But as with many coins in U.S. history, the story isn't always on the surface. To understand why this coin matters, we need to step back into the early 1980s. The United States Mint was producing billions of pennies every year. Inflation was rising, and the cost of making coins was becoming a concern. Just a couple of years earlier, in 1982, the composition of the penny had already changed from mostly copper to a zinc core with a thin copper coating. By 1984, this new composition was standard. The no mint mark on a 1984 penny simply means it was struck in Philadelphia. At that time, Philadelphia coins typically did not carry a mint mark, unlike those made in Denver or San Francisco. So on its own, a 1984 penny without a mint mark is not rare. In fact, hundreds of millions were produced. But here's where things get interesting. Among these millions of coins, a small number were struck with subtle errors. And in the world of coin collecting, errors can transform a common coin into something far more valuable. One of the most talked about features linked to the 1984 penny is the doubled ear error. This happens when the image of Lincoln's ear appears slightly doubled, almost like a shadow or echo of the original design. It's not something you'll notice right away. In fact, most people miss it entirely unless they're specifically looking for it. This error occurred during the minting process when the die used to stamp the coin had a slight misalignment. As a result, certain design elements were impressed twice, creating that doubled effect. Now, here's the key point. Not every 1984 penny has this error. In fact, only a small fraction do. And that's exactly what drives collector interest. Beyond the doubled ear, collectors also pay attention to the overall condition of the coin. A 1984 penny that has been heavily circulated, scratched, or worn down is usually worth just 1 cent. But a coin that has been preserved in near-perfect condition with sharp details and original luster can be worth significantly more. There are also minor variations and striking differences that collectors look for, such as slight doubling in other areas, off-center strikes, or unusual planchet flaws. Each of these adds a layer of uniqueness to a coin that would otherwise be overlooked. So how much can a 1984 no mint mark penny actually be worth? In most cases, the value is modest. A typical circulated coin is still just a penny. But when you factor in condition and errors, the story changes. A well-preserved 1984 penny in uncirculated condition can sell for a few dollars, sometimes more depending on grading. But coins with the doubled ear error have been known to sell for much higher prices. Some examples, depending on quality and clarity of the error, have reached values ranging from tens to even a few $100s in collector markets. High-grade specimens, especially those professionally graded and authenticated, can attract even stronger interest. Collectors are willing to pay a premium for coins that combine rarity, clear error features, and excellent condition. That brings us to an important question. How do you know if you have a valuable one? First, check the date. Make sure it clearly reads 1984. Next, look under the date. If there is no mint mark, that confirms it was minted in Philadelphia. Then, take a closer look at Lincoln's ear. You may need a magnifying glass or even a simple phone camera zoom. If you notice what looks like a second outline or a slight duplication around the ear, you might be looking at the doubled ear variety. But be careful. Not all doubling is valuable. Sometimes wear, damage, or lighting can create the illusion of doubling. True doubled dies have a distinct and consistent pattern that doesn't look random or accidental. If you think you've found something unusual, It's always a good idea to compare your coin with verified examples or consult a professional coin grading service. Authentication can make a significant difference in value, especially for higher-end collectors. Now, let's talk about something many people wonder about. Can these coins be faked? The short answer is yes, but it's not very common for a coin like this. Most counterfeit efforts focus on much rarer and more valuable coins. However, altered coins do exist. For example, someone might try to create the appearance of doubling by scratching or modifying the surface. That's why consistency is key. Real mint errors follow specific patterns because they originate from the die itself, not from random damage after the coin was made. Another interesting detail about the 1984 penny is its composition. As mentioned earlier, it's primarily made of zinc with a thin copper coating. This means the coin is lighter than older pennies made mostly of copper. If the coating wears off, you might see a dull gray color underneath, which is the zinc core. This change in material was part of a larger effort to reduce production costs. It also makes these coins more vulnerable to corrosion if the copper layer is damaged. Here's a fun fact that surprises many people. Even though the 1984 penny isn't considered rare overall, it's part of a generation of coins that reflect a major shift in U.S. coin production that makes it historically interesting, even if it's not always financially valuable. Another detail collectors enjoy is how small variations in minting can create entirely different categories within the same year. Two coins made in the same facility on the same day can end up with very different values simply because of tiny differences in the minting process. And that's really what draws collectors in. It's not just about the money. It's about the hunt. The idea that something small, ordinary, and easy to overlook could hold a hidden story, a hidden detail, a hidden value. For many collectors, the 1984 no-mint mark penny represents exactly that. It's accessible, it's familiar, and it's full of possibilities. You don't need a rare gold coin or a centuries-old artifact to start exploring. Sometimes all it takes is a closer look at the change you already have. Even today, people still search through rolls of pennies, hoping to find that one coin with something different. Something unusual. Something that stands out just enough to make you pause and look again. And occasionally, that curiosity pays off. But even when it doesn't, there's something satisfying about understanding the story behind these coins. Knowing where they came from, how they were made, and what makes one slightly different from another. The 1984 Lincoln penny with no mint mark may not be the most famous coin in American history. It may not break auction records or make headlines, but it holds a quiet kind of intrigue. It reminds us that value isn't always obvious, that rarity can hide in plain sight, and that sometimes the smallest details can make the biggest difference. So the next time you come across a penny, don't be too quick to dismiss it. Take a moment, look a little closer, because you never know. That ordinary coin in your hand might have a story waiting to be discovered. And maybe, just maybe, it's worth more than you think. Imagine finding a simple penny in your pocket, a coin you've probably ignored hundreds of times, and then discovering it might be worth far more than 1 cent. Not because it's ancient, not because it's gold, but because of a small detail most people never even notice. Today, we're talking about the 1986 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that looks ordinary, yet hides a story that continues to surprise collectors even today. The 1986 Lincoln penny is part of the long-running Lincoln cent series, one of the most recognizable coins in American history. First introduced in 1909 to honor President Abraham Lincoln, this coin has passed through generations, quietly sitting in jars, drawers, and wallets across the country. By 1986, the design was already familiar to millions. On the front, you see Lincoln's portrait, calm and steady. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stands tall, a symbol of history and unity. Now here's where things get interesting. Many people assume that if a coin has no mint mark, it must be rare. But in reality, for 1986 pennies, the absence of a mint mark actually tells you something very specific. It means the coin was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. At that time, Philadelphia often didn't include a mint mark on pennies, so a no mint mark 1986 penny is actually quite common in terms of production. But common does not always mean worthless. To understand why, we need to step back and look at the history of this coin. The year 1986 was part of a major transition period in U.S. coinage. Just a few years earlier, in 1982, the U.S. Mint changed the composition of pennies. Before 1982, pennies were mostly copper. After 1982, they were made primarily of zinc with a thin copper coating. By 1986, all standard pennies were zinc-based. This change matters because collectors pay close attention to composition, weight, and variations. The 1986 penny weighs about 2.5 grams if it's zinc, which is lighter than the older copper coins. This shift created subtle differences that collectors still study today. Now let's talk about design. On the front of the 1986 penny, you'll see the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner. Above his head is the word Liberty, and in front of him, the date 1986. If there is no mint mark under the date that confirms it was minted in Philadelphia, on the reverse side, the Lincoln Memorial appears, designed by Frank Gasparo. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny image of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. It's one of those small details that many people overlook, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. So if millions of these coins were made, why do people still search for them? The answer lies in condition and errors. Most 1986 no-mint mark pennies are worth exactly 1 cent. But when you find one in exceptional condition, its value can increase significantly. Coins that were never circulated, known as mint state coins, can sell for several dollars, sometimes even more depending on grading. But the real excitement comes from error coins. Error coins are mistakes made during the minting process, and they are highly collectible because they are rare and unique. In 1986 pennies, collectors have found several types of errors. These include off-center strikes, where the design is not properly aligned, double die errors, where the design appears slightly duplicated, and die cracks, where small lines appear due to wear. In the minting tools point, one of the most sought-after variations is the 1986 double die obverse. In this case, parts of the design on the front, especially the lettering, appear slightly doubled. It's not always obvious at first glance, but under magnification, it becomes clear. These coins can be worth significantly more than standard pennies, sometimes reaching hundreds of dollars depending on clarity and condition. There are also cases where the coin was struck on the wrong planchet, meaning the blank metal disc used was not intended for a penny. These are extremely rare and can be worth a substantial amount because of their uniqueness. Let's talk about real value examples. A standard circulated 1986 no-mint mark penny is typically worth 1 to 5 cents. Not exciting, right? But a high-grade uncirculated example, graded MS65 or higher, can sell for around $5 to $20. If you step into higher grades like MS67, the value can jump significantly, sometimes reaching over $100. Now, when you bring error coins into the picture, the numbers can climb even higher. A strong double die or a dramatic off-center strike can sell for anywhere from $50 to several $100s. In rare cases, unusual minting errors have reached even higher prices at auction, especially when collectors compete for unique pieces. So, how do you know if you have one of these valuable coins? First, check the date. Make sure it clearly reads 1986. Then look below the date. If there is no mint mark, you have a Philadelphia coin. Next, examine the coin closely. Look at the lettering, especially the words Liberty and In God We Trust. Do you see any doubling or unusual shapes? Also check the alignment. Is the design centered, or does it look shifted? Off-center coins are easy to spot and often more valuable. Look for cracks or raised lines, which may indicate die errors. Weight is another important clue. A standard 1986 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. If it feels heavier or lighter, it might be something unusual, and that's worth investigating further. To avoid fakes, it's important to remember that most counterfeit coins try to imitate rare, high-value pieces. Since the 1986 penny is not extremely rare in normal form, fakes are less common, but altered coins do exist. Some people may try to modify dates or add fake doubling effects. Always compare your coin with verified images, and if you think you have something special, consider having it authenticated by a professional grading service. Here's something many people don't realize. Even though billions of 1986 pennies were made, very few have survived in perfect condition. Most were used in everyday transactions, scratched, worn, and eventually forgotten. That means truly flawless examples are actually quite scarce today. Another interesting fact is that coin collecting often starts with coins like this. A simple penny becomes a gateway into a much larger world. People begin by checking dates, then looking for mint marks, then studying errors. Before they know it, they've developed a trained eye for details most people never notice. Collectors love the 1986 no mint mark penny not because it is the rarest coin ever made, but because it represents possibility. It reminds them that value is not always obvious. Sometimes it's hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to take a closer look. There's also a sense of connection. This coin has passed through countless hands over the years. It has been part of everyday life, from grocery stores to gas stations. Holding one is like holding a small piece of shared history. And here's the most surprising part. Even today, people still find valuable coins in circulation. It doesn't happen every day, but it does happen. Someone checks their change, notices something unusual, and suddenly that ordinary penny becomes something much more. So the next time you see a 1986 penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a moment, look closer, check the details, because while most of them are worth just a cent, a few carry stories, errors, and conditions that make them stand out. And that's the beauty of coin collecting. It turns everyday objects into mysteries. It rewards patience, curiosity, and attention to detail. Who knows? The next coin you pick up might not just be spare change. It might be a hidden gem waiting to be discovered. What if the next penny you find in your pocket isn't just 1 cent, but a small piece of history that collectors quietly search for every day? Most people overlook it, spend it, or toss it aside. But the 1991 Lincoln penny with no mint mark might be more interesting than you think at first glance. This coin looks completely ordinary. It's a standard Lincoln penny, something millions of Americans have handled without a second thought. But this specific version, the 1991 penny without a mint mark, has a story behind it that connects everyday pocket change to the larger world of coin collecting. The 1991 Lincoln penny is part of a long-running series that began back in 1909 to honor President Abraham Lincoln. By 1991, the design had already become one of the most recognizable coins in American history. On the front, you see Lincoln's profile, calm and dignified, facing to the right. Above him is the word Liberty, and to the side, the year 1991. On the back, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial, a design that had been used since 1959. Now here's where things get interesting. The phrase "no mint mark" often creates confusion, especially for new collectors. Many people assume that a coin without a mint mark must be rare or unusual. But in reality, for 1991 pennies, having no mint mark actually tells you something very specific about where it was made. Coins minted in Philadelphia traditionally did not carry a mint mark for most of the 20th century. So if you have a 1991 penny with no mint mark, it means it was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. In fact, billions of these coins were made that year, making them very common in circulation. But that doesn't mean every 1991 no mint mark penny is worthless. Far from it. The real value lies in condition, and sometimes in small errors that most people would never notice. In 1991, the United States Mint was still producing pennies using a copper-plated zinc composition. This change had been introduced in 1982 to reduce production costs. So the 1991 penny is made mostly of zinc, with a thin outer layer of copper. It weighs about 2.5 grams and has that familiar reddish-brown color, although over time, some coins darken or develop spots depending on how they were stored. The design itself remained consistent, but collectors pay close attention to small details. The sharpness of Lincoln's features, the clarity of the lettering, and the condition of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse all play a role in determining value. Now let's talk about why some of these coins can actually be worth more than 1 cent. The answer comes down to rarity in condition and the possibility of mint errors. Most 1991 pennies you'll find are worn from years of use. They've been passed from hand to hand, dropped, scratched, and exposed to the elements. But if you happen to find one in uncirculated condition, meaning it has never really been used in everyday transactions, its value can increase significantly. Collectors often look for coins graded as MS65 or higher, which means they are in excellent condition with very few imperfections. A 1991 no mint mark penny in this kind of condition can sell for several dollars, sometimes even more depending on demand. But the real excitement comes from error coins. These are coins that were struck incorrectly during the minting process. Even a tiny mistake can turn an ordinary penny into something collectors are eager to buy. One example is a double die error. This happens when the coin's design is accidentally stamped twice in slightly different positions, creating a doubling effect on the letters or numbers. On a 1991 penny, this might appear in the word Liberty or the date itself. These errors can be subtle, so they often go unnoticed unless you look closely. Another possible error is an off-center strike, where the design is not perfectly aligned with the coin's edge. This can make the coin look unusual, and depending on how dramatic the misalignment is, it can increase its value. There are also coins with die cracks, where small lines appear on the surface due to cracks in the minting equipment. While not all die cracks add value, some collectors specifically look for unique or interesting patterns. Now you might be wondering, have any 1991 no-mint mark pennies actually sold for real money? The answer is yes, though it depends heavily on condition and uniqueness. For example, a high-grade 1991 penny with no mint mark, certified by a professional grading service, can sell for anywhere between $5 and $20. That might not sound like life-changing money, but for a coin that most people would spend without thinking, it's a surprising upgrade. Error coins can go even higher. Some verified double die or unusual error examples have sold for $50 or more, especially if they are in excellent condition. The combination of rarity and visual uniqueness makes them appealing to collectors. So how can you tell if the 1991 penny you have is worth anything? This starts with careful observation. First, check the date. Make sure it clearly reads 1991. Then look just below the date. If there is no letter, that confirms it was minted in Philadelphia. Next, examine the coin's condition. Does it still have a bright, original shine, or is it dull and worn? Are the details sharp, or have they been flattened over time? The better the condition, the higher the potential value. After that, look closely for any unusual features. Use a magnifying glass if you can. Check the lettering for signs of doubling. Look at the edges to see if the design is off-center. Inspect the surface for cracks or strange lines. If you think you've found something unusual, it may be worth getting the coin evaluated by a professional grading service. These organizations can confirm authenticity, assess condition, and sometimes identify errors that are not obvious to the untrained. It's also important to be aware of fakes or misleading claims. While it's uncommon for someone to counterfeit a 1991 penny, there are cases where altered coins are passed off as rare errors. For example, someone might try to modify a coin to make it look like it has doubling or damage that resembles a mint error. A genuine error coin will usually show consistent characteristics that match known minting issues. Random scratches or damage from circulation are not the same as a true error. That's why verification is so important if you're dealing with a coin that appears valuable. Here's something many people don't realize. The value of a coin isn't just about rarity. It's also about demand. Collectors often build complete sets of Lincoln pennies by year and mint mark. Even a common coin like the 1991 no mint mark penny becomes important if someone is trying to complete their collection in high-grade condition. There's also a sense of nostalgia attached to these coins. For many Americans, pennies from the early 1990s bring back memories of everyday life from that era. Holding one can feel like holding a small piece of the past. And here's a fun detail. If you look closely at the Lincoln Memorial on the back of the coin, you can actually see a tiny image of Lincoln sitting inside the building. It's one of the smallest detailed designs ever placed on a circulating U.S. coin, and many people never notice it. Another interesting fact is that billions of pennies are produced each year, but only a tiny fraction are saved in perfect condition. That's why uncirculated coins become more valuable over time. As years pass, fewer high-quality examples remain available. Collectors today are more connected than ever, thanks to online marketplaces and auction platforms. This means that even coins found in pocket change can quickly be sold to someone across the country who recognizes their value. So why do collectors continue to care about a coin like the 1991 no mint mark penny? It comes down to a combination of accessibility and possibility. Almost anyone can find one. You don't need to buy expensive collections or attend exclusive auctions. You just need to pay attention to the coins you already have. At the same time, there's always the chance of discovering something special. A high-grade coin, a subtle error, or a unique variation could be sitting unnoticed in a jar of loose change. That sense of discovery is what keeps people searching. It turns an ordinary object into something worth examining, something worth learning about, and sometimes something worth saving. The next time you come across a 1991 penny with no mint mark, take a moment before you spend it. Look at it closely. Notice the details. Think about where it's been and how many hands it has passed through over the years. Because even though most of these coins are common, every now and then, one stands out. And when it does, it reminds us that value isn't always obvious at first glance. Sometimes, it's hidden in the smallest details, waiting for someone curious enough to notice. What if the next penny you find in your pocket isn't just 1 cent, but a hidden piece of history that collectors quietly search for? And what if a coin from as recent as 1995 could still hold surprises that most people completely overlook? Today, we're taking a closer look at the 1995 D-Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that many people have handled, spent, or ignored without ever realizing what it might actually be worth. At first glance, the 1995 D Lincoln penny looks completely ordinary. It's small, copper-colored, and carries the familiar face of Abraham Lincoln on the front. You've probably seen hundreds of them. But this coin is part of a much larger story, one that stretches back over a century and continues to evolve even today. The 1995 Lincoln penny was minted during a time when the United States economy was stable, and coin production was focused on keeping up with everyday circulation needs. Billions of pennies were produced that year across different mints, including the Denver Mint, which is marked by the small d on the front of the coin. The D Mint mark tells us that this particular coin was struck in Denver, one of the key coin-producing facilities in the United States. BY 1995. The Lincoln cent had already been in circulation for more than 85 years. First introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of Abraham Lincoln, it was the first U.S. coin to feature a real person. Over the decades, the design had remained largely consistent, making it one of the most recognizable coins in American history. Now, let's take a closer look at what makes the 1995 D penny unique. On the front, you'll see Lincoln's profile facing right, along with the words, "In God We Trust," above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the year 1995, along with the D Mint mark to the right. On the back, the design still features the Lincoln Memorial, which was used from 1959 to 2008. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny image of the Lincoln statue inside the memorial, a small detail that many people never noticed. In terms of composition, the 1995 D penny is made primarily of zinc with a thin copper coating. This change was introduced in 1982 to reduce production costs, as copper had become too expensive to use in large quantities. So while the coin looks like solid copper, it's actually mostly zinc underneath. Now here's where things get interesting. While millions upon millions of 1995 D pennies were produced, not all of them are equal. Some carry small variations, errors, or exceptional conditions that can make them far more valuable than their face value. One of the most talked about aspects of 1995 pennies is the famous double die error. But that error is typically associated with the Philadelphia Mint coins, not the Denver ones. However, that doesn't mean the 1995 D penny is without its own potential surprises. Collectors have reported minor doubling, off-center strikes, and other subtle minting errors on Denver coins as well. These errors are often hard to spot, but when they are confirmed, they can significantly increase a coin's value. Another factor that plays a major role in value is condition. Most 1995 D pennies you find today have been circulated, meaning they've been used in everyday transactions. These coins are usually worth only a few cents at most. But if you happen to come across a 1995 D penny in uncirculated condition, meaning it has never been used and still retains its original shine, it could be worth much more to the right collector. In fact, high-grade examples of the 1995 D penny have sold for surprising amounts. Coins that are graded at the very top levels, such as MS-66 or higher, can fetch anywhere from $10 to over $100 depending on their quality and eye appeal. And in rare cases, coins with exceptional luster and no visible flaws have sold for even more at auction. So what makes these high-grade coins so valuable comes down to rarity in condition. While billions were made, very few have survived in near-perfect state. Over time, coins get scratched, worn, or damaged. Finding one that looks almost exactly as it did the day it was minted is much harder than you might think. If you're wondering whether you might have a valuable 1995 D penny, there are a few things to look for. First, check the mint mark. It should be a small D located just below the year on the front of the coin. Next, examine the surface closely. Look for strong, clear details in Lincoln's hair and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. The sharper the details, the better the condition. Also pay attention to the color. Uncirculated pennies often have a bright, reddish tone known as red in the coin collecting world. Over time, copper tends to darken, turning brown. Coins that still have their original red color are generally more valuable. You should also look for any unusual features. This could include doubling in the letters, misaligned designs, or anything that looks slightly off. Even small differences can sometimes indicate a mint error, which could increase the coin's value significantly. When it comes to identifying a real coin versus a fake, the good news is that counterfeit 1995 D pennies are not very common. Because the coin is not extremely rare in general, it's usually not worth the effort for counterfeiters to replicate it. However, altered coins do exist. Some people may try to modify mint marks or create fake errors to make a coin appear more valuable. To protect yourself, it's always a good idea to compare your coin with verified images from trusted sources or have it evaluated by a professional grading service. These services can authenticate the coin, assign it a grade, and seal it in a protective holder, which also helps preserve its condition. Here's a fun fact that might surprise you. Even though pennies are often overlooked and sometimes even considered a nuisance, they are still one of the most widely collected coins in the United States. Many collectors started their journey simply by checking their spare change, searching for something unusual or valuable. And coins like the 1995 D penny are often part of that discovery process. Another interesting detail is that the Lincoln Memorial design on the back of this coin was eventually replaced in 2009 to celebrate the 200th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. This means that the 1995 D penny represents part of the final years of a design that lasted nearly half a century. Collectors today appreciate the 1995 D penny not just for its potential value, but also for its place in the larger story of American coinage. It's a reminder that even modern coins can carry history, craftsmanship, and the possibility of hidden value. There's also something exciting about the idea that a coin so common could still hold a surprise. It turns everyday objects into something worth paying attention to. It encourages curiosity, observation, and a deeper appreciation for the small details that most people ignore. And that's really what coin collecting is all about. It's not just about finding something valuable. It's about the thrill of the hunt, the stories behind each coin, and the connection to history that each piece represents. So the next time you come across a penny, take a closer look. Check the date. Look for the mint mark. Examine the details. Because even a coin from 1995, something many people would consider too modern to matter, might just have more to offer than you expect. And who knows, the next time you reach into your pocket or open a jar of loose change, you might find a 1995 D Lincoln penny that's been quietly waiting to be noticed all along.